Excellent. Well, again, thanks for agreeing to meet me. And I know it's been a long time coming, especially for me. And I just want to say it's an honor for me to speak to you today. One for me that's been a long time coming because, and I really want to thank you for the courage in publishing your books, especially the book Psychic Warrior in 1996, because it exposed a lot of people, including myself, to the remote viewing program and your experiences inside of it. And for me
Thank you.
personally, in 1997, I was invited to a CRV training course in London by a guy called Lee Culver. And the main book on the recommended reading list was your book. And over the 4 day course I did in CRV back then, I literally read through the book 4 times, continuously over and over because I found it so illuminating. So yeah, I
What
just
year
want
was
to.
this that you were invited to a course?
Yes, yes, and it was in 1997, and in fact, several of the people that took the course in CRV in 97 also then, because I had the letter still, they went on a few weeks later to take 2 training courses with you, I think early in 98 as well. So it was the
Yeah, I
same.
had a partner there uh, in the UK by the name of Roy Farrell.
Okay, yeah,
And Roy Farrell used to, the deal I had with people in those early days was you organize the course, and then what'll happen is based on however many people you bring into the course, we'll cover the expenses. I travel. I usually stayed with them,
yeah,
and then it would be I'd just split it with them 50-50
yeah,
because but I trained thousands of people that way.
yeah.
And the first place I started doing the training was in the UK. Then
Ah,
people
interesting. I
started
didn't know
coming
that.
from Germany and France and Norway, Sweden,
Yeah,
the Netherlands. People started coming from Europe,
yeah,
and then they all started doing the same thing. Hey, if we form a course in Germany, will you come do that? Yeah, same deal.
yeah.
So then it just kept going that way. And then eventually Roy just got to the point, it exceeded his ability to market and to reach into a new market. So, but anyway, that's what happened. That's,
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. And as I said, at the time, that book was hugely influential on essentially setting me on this journey that's lasted all these years since. So I personally want to thank you for that. It's been a real influential book,
thank
and not
you.
only that as well. This book as well, your controlled remote viewing book as well. I got that. I think that came out in 2008, if I
8.
remember correctly.
Yeah, it was published in 2008.
That was again, being trained in CRV. That was a hugely influential book as well because I really liked your theories on how you really went into depth on everything, which is something that people couldn't get from a few days training and from the existing
Yeah.
CRV manual.
And that's a genuine manual because it not only gives you examples, but it gives
Yeah,
you the philosophy, the science, the why, the how, etc., like that. So anything other than that that's shown up has always just been essentially a training outline.
yeah,
So, and not a manual
yeah,
because
yeah,
nothing but that has been an actual manual. But that's really not, I guess, unique to me. It's that I was brought up in the army. I had a father that was an army officer, a grandfather who was a colonel of infantry in World War One, and then my father fought World War Two in Europe and Korea, and then I came along. Vietnam was pretty much over by the time I graduated high school, but
yeah,
I had a draft card, and then I had an appointment to West Point, so that got me out of the draft. And I didn't go to West Point, so I was supposed to report in '73. And I had a friend whose father was an architect, Cliff Schneider. He came to my house like the Friday before I was supposed to go on Saturday to fly to New York, report in for Beast Barracks on Monday. And he goes, I don't think you want to do this. And I was like, I don't know. Because I grew up in the 60s and here it was like 72. I graduated at 17 years of age. And so I chose not to go. And Cliff and I went down to Puerto Penasco in Mexico and thought we were going to like open up a bar on the beach in Puerto Penasco, Mexico. And we learned very quickly, I took all my money out of the bank. So we, between the two of us, probably had $650 in a
Yeah.
Volkswagen bus, true 1970s, right? And driving down there to Puerto Penasco. And like a month later, we were like, picking up beer bottles out of the sand for like 5 cents a piece so we could buy tacos, tacos and more cerveza.
Excellent.
And we ended up having to call parents and come home, which his dad was okay with it
Yeah.
because his dad was an architect. So he was like, cool, you sowed some oats, got crazy, did some fun stuff, right? Good, come on back, son. My dad was, you son of a bitch, you little fuck, you missed an appointment to West Point. So that's a funny story. I
Excellent.
was afraid he was going to kill me and throw me off a bridge.
Awesome. You have some amazing experiences. So we were talking about your book, and in your book there, I think on page 27, it talks about how you feel that the closure of the Stargate program, by the CIA at the time, and you kind of hint it felt like it was kind of stage managed. Uh, do
Oh,
you still have
absolutely. Yeah.
do you still have that feeling? Because over the last 6 weeks or so, I don't know if you're keeping up on the kind of UAP disclosures and stuff, but we're getting a lot of people come forward now, claiming that then they have a new word for it now called psionic asset, and they're claiming that they've been part of government remote viewing and psychic projects going back, at least a couple of decades.
Anybody can say anything now, Daz. People say crap all the time. It's why, I did this podcast once upon a time, I think with Sean, it might have been somebody else. And I titled it The Rise of the Con. And I just did research and drew a direct correlation to the rise, the increase in social media and the accessibility of social media to everybody and anybody, and how the number of reported, con man and con women types of crimes, swindling, other things from Tinder to Instagram to TikTok to you name it, it's out there, Facebook, wherever. And there is a direct correlation to the increase, which in the last 25 years, there's been somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 62% increase in the number of those kinds of swindling operations
Yep.
or crimes. Now, those are crimes perpetrated against people for money that have sometimes just resorted in murder. But you're now, those were thefts, larcenies, swindling of people. If you're just looking at the number of liars that have shown up, because during the last 25 years, there was nothing to stop them from doing what they were doing. Very seldom were they prosecuted for doing what they were doing. And law enforcement, my son's a detective, but law enforcement was very clear that they kind of leave this up to the individual consumer. If you want to believe what somebody says and you want to pay them money to belong to their cult or some other kinds of things, that's not against the law. It's only against the law for us if the cult leader is, diddling little girls or boys and doing those kinds of things, or if they are kidnapping people, provable. But if you're there on your own and you're giving them your life savings and asking your parents for more money and they give it to you and you give it to that person, that's on you. So, but it has just become a ridiculous thing, and people, because they want everything in 106 characters, right? It's amazing, people don't even want to listen to a podcast anymore because they want it to be, Twitter style. They want it to be a TikTok. They want it to be just, why are you belaboring the answer? I answer in context. They don't want to hear it. Why? Because that has at least the last generation and a half that we have created with these platforms. They are getting stupider. I mean, stupider. IQ scores are dropping. High school graduation scores are dropping. graduates from college, their knowledge base, their GPAs, and their well-rounded, that's all dropping. It's all dropping because they're tied to this. And so they are not hyper intuitive, and they are not hyper discerning. They are not even discerning. And somebody comes up with the next conspiratorial idea, or, I mean, look, these guys make money off of it. Stephen Greer stopped being an emergency room physician to go represent this UFO gig because it gave him fame, popularity, and it paid his bills. All those people paid his bills, and he didn't accomplish anything. Not one thing. Every promise rendered. Oh, we're shaking it loose over here, and then everything they say, it's all, oh, this is a leaked memorandum. The leaked memorandum. Let me explain that. You go to one of the guys in the UFO group with him was a former Air Force non-commissioned officer, senior non-commissioned officer, which means nothing. But that guy claims to have had access to special programs and this kind of stuff and that kind of stuff. And he calls up somebody in the Air Force Public Affairs Office and asks to have an audience with someone in the PAO. So the PAO, which is typically a captain, maybe a major, they may arrange for this meeting to happen. So Stephen Greer and this guy go there. Well, it's a standard procedure that when something like that happens, that Air Force officer will take notes, and then he will type a memorandum for record. The Pentagon or any military organization, and I'm certain that the UK forces have something similar, the memorandum for record is a pre-printed form that you then type in and fill in the details of that meeting. Yes. I met on this day at this time in this office with these two individuals. They raised these questions. I gave these answers, and recommendation is, I throw this in the trash or whatever the case might be. Well, that NCO called back and said, hey, can we get a copy of your MFR? To which the guy was like, sure, and sent it to him. It wasn't classified. It wasn't FOUO. It wasn't secret, top secret. It wasn't anything. It's just a memorandum for record. The Pentagon produces 3 million of them a day.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So, but when it gets into the hands of Greer and this guy, it now becomes a leaked memo, right? Look, we have this memo documenting this conversation where we demanded, full disclosure on this and that and that and this, which of course nothing ever happened. But you go back to that community, when you consider that it's documented that the population of the planet, that 50% of it, let's just take, first world, the UK, Europe, the United States, Canada, 50% of the population is below average intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Below average. So the average IQ in the United States is 98. 99 for men, 97 for women, the average 98. And if you have an 85, you can't enter the United States Army or the Marine Corps. The United States services will not take you. Why? Yes. Yes. Because you're too stupid to be trained. Mm-hmm. With 85.
Yes. Yeah.
But our average is 98. Mm-hmm. So, and 50% of the population is below that. Yeah. Yeah. It gives you an idea, right?
Yeah.
Non-discerning, poorly educated, not well read, understand social media, and are constantly looking for reasons to be offended about something. Yeah. Right? Particularly their country, their government. Something else, demanding that it's all supposed to be revealed to them. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I mathematically, scientifically, realistically, logically, and based on my own experience, think it foolish for us to ever consider ourselves as the only intelligent life in the galaxy.
Yes.
Let alone the known, visible universe. I think you'd have to be an absolute moron to think that we would be the only thing that rose up to this level in this galaxy.
Yeah.
That said, the idea about whether we have interfaced with them or whether we have retrieved crashed vehicles or other kinds of things, if that indeed happened, it's not going to be something that the US government or the British government or the Russian government or anyone else reveals to the public. They're not going to do it, because if they have it, they're going to try to reverse engineer and see what they can, what kind of leverage it can bring to them. And they couldn't care less about the Stephen Greers and the other guy in the US that came out that, is nothing but a purveyor of hearsay, who came out and, this guy that said I was part of this task force, Grosh, whatever his name is.
Grosh, yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's just pathetic. And people don't think about that. It's like this guy comes out and says these things. And then when one reporter asks him, well, did you see these things? Did you see spacecraft? Did you see alien bodies?
Yes.
No, but men I trust, colleagues that I trust,
absolutely,
they tell me I have. Okay, well, now that's just nothing but hearsay.
Hearsay, yeah.
Okay, but let's say this, okay, it's hearsay and you refuse to accept that, but what are their names? Oh, I can't tell you their names. Okay, now it's really hearsay. Because if they told you and you want to turn around and get the American public to believe this, but you're just flashing hearsay, why are you doing that? You're doing it because you want your year of fame, whatever that might be, right? Everybody's going to bow down, to you because call you a whistleblower, which he is not. A whistleblower has to meet very specific criteria under the waste, fraud, and abuse criteria. The whistleblower rules are spelled out very clearly about what it is, and he is not a whistleblower. Neither am I. People have called me such, and I am not. So he is not a whistleblower. He is just a guy trying to make a name for himself.
Yes.
And get pushed into some place. He likes the idea that people fawn over him, and think he's really brave for doing what he did. But what has he accomplished? Not a damn thing.
Nothing yet.
People who support him say, oh, well, he said he would give the names of these people if he was in a classified hearing, in a secret hearing. Okay, well, let me read everybody in on that. He doesn't have a security clearance. And if he doesn't have a security clearance, that means he's never going to be in a classified meeting. And he's never going to ever tell those names because he's never going to have the opportunity. He damn well knows that. But all the people he says that to don't know that. If you don't have a clearance, you're not going to be in a classified hearing. You're not going to form a classified hearing and give you a clearance so you can come in and supposedly give the names of two people that told you that they personally, saw alien bodies and spacecraft. But people just don't want to accept that. So they just want to be offended. They want to run around and set their hair on fire and, bounce off of each other wherever they happen to be. And to me, it is such a waste of human time and energy and intellect, if there is any there, that it could be focused on so many other things to just improve the human condition, vice and understand the world around us. Vice thinking that our country, even if they did know something about this, which they may, I don't know. But even if they did, they owe you no explanation of that. You don't get to stand there and puff your chest out and whine and carry on. And it's like, well, yeah, but they're having Senate hearings on it. They're having, these special congressmen and other stuff. You go, well, if you're that stupid, those guys will come to a hot dog eating contest if they think it'll get somebody to write a check, because they have to run for re-election in 2 years. They're always looking for a way to garner voting support or funding support, so they can run their campaigns again. It's a failed system. And it's a failed system that people, buy into this idea that the government owes them something and owes them truth just simply because they ask for it. That doesn't happen in the UK.
No.
particularly when it comes to MI6, right? Or
MI6,
TQSAS.
DI-55. There's many of them. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing. You're not entitled to that.
No.
It's a government secret, Official Secrets Act,
Yeah. Yeah.
and more severely in the UK, will
Yeah.
they prosecute you than in the United States? Will they
Yeah.
prosecute you for it?
Yeah.
I mean, so I just sit back and grin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I shake my head ruefully. I mean, I cannot believe how far this has gone and how much celeb these people
Yeah.
have, created for themselves. And
Yes.
then when people hear somebody like you or me talking about it, frankly and honestly and knowledgeably,
Yeah.
they don't want to hear it.
No.
And
No.
just,
I'm
they'll cast
finding that. Yeah.
aspersions and
I'm finding that on X because literally just this last week, um, there's a couple of news reporters. Russ Colhart from Australia. He's put out a statement from several people saying, and it's just crazy because me and you we've been into the remote viewing all these years, and I've read the entire 110,000 pages of Stargate information. I've got it all database, but the new statements and allegations are coming out are that, and this is just going to make you go crazy as well because it's made me go crazy, is that they have evidence. Of course, he hasn't come forward with any names, but they have evidence and testimony from several people saying that the U.S. government are kind of child trafficking children in third world countries, and then torturing them and making them into psionic telepathic assets for communication with UAP type craft.
I mean, it's a load of horseshit. But
Yeah.
but once
With
again,
no evidence
no
whatsoever.
evidence, nothing. Just
Yeah.
stand up and say it, and
Yeah.
there will be instant followers and likes and whatever else drives these
Yeah.
people to do these things. But it's gotten to the point that people are not. They do not care about truth or even any semblance or version of it anymore. They will
Yes.
say anything
Yeah.
just to get more followers or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just, I thought that when my former friend, my old friend Ed Dames, turned into Doctor Doom
Yeah.
because but there was the woman he was with at the time that created that in him. He was prior to that time not that guy.
Yeah.
He did not act like that. He did
Okay.
not think like that.
Yeah.
He is a highly intelligent guy with a really good heart, speaks Mandarin Chinese, reads it, writes it,
Yeah.
speaks it fluently. He's a physicist. His two sons, Enoch and Aaron, are physicists.
Mm.
Uh, he was always a very, very close friend. The three closest people there were Mel Riley, Ed, and myself.
Yes.
But when Ed was got out of the army, retired, and went to Albuquerque because he was trying to take SciTech, PSI-TECH, of which Mel Riley and I were both vice presidents of SciTech. And we were trying to put this into the corporate arena, more so Ed was. Mel and I were still in the Army. Mel was getting ready to retire. And hell, I had gone, to be a battalion XO and then later a battalion commander in the 82nd Airborne Division. So the idea of, disengaging from all that to sell SciTech was not happening. But I was talking to Ed when I was a battalion commander, and he's telling me, yeah, I got to go move the car. This is in Albuquerque. Why? He said, because the repo man is trying to find it. Because he retired as a major. He got divorced from his wife, Chris, and he had to probably pay alimony. I don't know, but it was tough. And he had the boys with him, and he had to move his Jeep
Yeah.
around all the time. So the repo man didn't get it. And I just said, Ed, fucking teach, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you understand this. You're a smart guy. Teach, put out a shingle and teach it. He was the first guy to actually start teaching civilians to do it. And one of the first people that came along was Jonina Dorif. He was
Yes.
the woman that said, oh, yeah, I can make, this is the me. I got this.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to latch onto this guy and I'm going to mold and shape him into the
Yeah.
moneymaker I know he can be. And she
Yeah.
just absolutely corrupted who he
Yeah.
was. Ultimately ended up stealing his company.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a
really
shame, isn't it?
horrible
Because
story.
I've seen all, I know about the history and I've seen all the documents and stuff. And SciTech back then, in those very early days, it had a lot of backing. It had several people from Stargate working from it. Ingo Swann gave Ed Dames permission, and Ed Dames is the only person that was ever given permission by Ingo Swann. He gave him Ed Dames a license to teach CRV. So he's the only person that did that. So Ingo was backing it, and his communications with because I have his letters, his communications were saying, I'm pushing you to all the people I know, I'm pushing your company. You also had General Stubblebine involved I think he was on the board of directors as well. So
He was, yeah.
it had huge kind of, at the time I thought it had huge ability to go somewhere, but it kind of fizzled out. But I guess that was because Danes went in a slightly different direction.
Well, it started off to, I beat Bert Stubblebine, the two-star, retired, was now working at BDM Corporation, which is a Beltway Bandit. Are you familiar with the term?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Beltway Bandit that dealt with intelligence
Yep.
in the intelligence services. And I was there that day that we were there to pitch him. And I'll tell you why it's not that Bert Stubblebine didn't see the envisioned value of bringing that in, but the problem is that the lexicon, the deliverables, the payout, what we can do for you, was not well grounded, not well thought out, not well articulated, and it isn't even to this day in most cases.
Yep.
I train a lot of people now. This is not what I do for my living. I have a medical training company that during the global war on terror ended up being the largest training company basically in the world. We were training 23,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, Coast Guard, Border Patrolmen, law enforcement, very federal and state law and local law enforcement agencies in tactical combat casualty care and operational medicine, which was defined as actions at the point of wounding on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And it was a very rewarding and a really lucrative job to have. And so 2SRG was my company then. It was Deployment Medicine International, where I had a partner, John Hagman and Jeremy Hildahl, and we were going to town with this, and we were training, as I said, tens of thousands a year.
Yeah.
And then when the war dwindled down, contracts for DoD went away, and contracts for other organizations like National Nuclear Security Administration, Office of Secure Transportation, or Department of State for their, to offset and augment what OpMed was capable of doing for State Department. So we had the training contract for all of the embassies, particularly all of their medical providers in the embassies, particularly those that were in hostile fire zones, because you get guys that go there, family practice doc, it's shoveled into, into an embassy or a consulate somewhere. And what he's used to doing is tracking the ambassador's, heart meds, and somebody else's cholesterol and some other thing, and, handling what a family practice doctor would handle when they come in, along with the same nursing staff or PAs. But all of a sudden they get, the embassy gets in a firefight, the Marines do, and they're bringing wounded Marines or wounded embassy personnel and throwing them through the front door. And what does this family practice doctor do? I can tell you the amount of trauma experience they've got wouldn't fill a day. Seriously, would not fill a day that they get out of med school. It's not part of their board certification process.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do, is spin them up so that they know how to do tension, how to do a needle thoracentesis, how to do surgical airways, that they know how to manage massive trauma, high pressure, high volume bleeds, and those kinds of things, maintain patent airways, etc. So all of that stuff is part of the teaching process. That's what I do, and that's my main life in the contracts I still have. But when the global war on terror ended, after a very long dry spell of teaching, only maybe a class here or there every 2 or 3 years, and mostly I just came in as a guest lecturer, and I would have somebody else teaching. But now I just decided that it was time to start it again, because people started to ask questions about it again. There was kind of a resurgence of interest in it once again, and there wasn't in the around 2000, 2001, etc. Why? Because we were at fucking war.
Yep.
The world was at war again. So everybody that had come up in the New Age era that began in the 60s and evolved into the 70s,
Yep.
And to a certain degree strengthened in the 80s and rose in the 90s even, because everyone was in anticipation of the millennial turnover, right?
Yep.
It was the whole New Age movement for 40 years have been focused on that.
Yeah.
And then, 2000 comes along and it's uneventful. Then 2001 comes along and it's eventful and in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
People started losing interest. Before the year 2000, there were 3,600 institutions of spiritual learning and practice across the world.
Yep.
I'm talking about like the Omega Institute, Esalen,
Yes.
on Kirpala, the crossings and the crossings in Austin, all these different things, multi-million-dollar facilities, some, not all, but some, and they had huge student populations, lots of instructors that came in, and they were thriving. They were flourishing.
Yes.
But after 2001, by 2002, they were starting to dry up and blow away.
Yeah.
By 2010, there were less than 300 of those
Wow. Yeah.
across the globe. And there are probably less than those now. But some of them have always stayed around, like the Omega Institute,
Yeah.
but with really small student populations now.
Yeah.
And difficult to get instructors to go there because,
Yes.
and when I was there teaching, 500 students, in a class,
Yeah. Wow.
massive,
Yeah.
but that would never happen now. And I just watched it after the war started. I still would go there, but we go from 500 for years of 500 students down to, 200, 100,
Wow.
75, 50,
Yes. Yeah.
and descending further. And my good friend, Ken and Joyce Beck, who Ken was the first marketing director of Dell Computers. And he was there for 10, 15 years. And when he retired, he cashed in all of his stock options, which was tens of millions of dollars.
Yep.
He wanted to do something to give back to the world, to the planet. So he built the Crossings in Austin, Texas, which was the most magnificent place to go teach or to go and be taught of anything globally that you might see. Truly 5-star accommodations, organic chef that prepared. There was a competition for organic chefs, a competition to choose who was going to be the chef and run it. And it was a competition for who was going to be the chef for the coffee shop and the things that were going to be sold out of the coffee shop. They had this beautiful spa and store and all this other stuff. It was amazing. And the classrooms were magnificent. I mean, all of the latest, greatest, teaching tools and stuff. And it just dried up like in 3 quick, short years. And then Ken, they made the decision to, work with the buyers, the new buyers. They sold it, kind of taught them the business. And then if you go on the website for the Crossings in Austin, you're going to see a literal shell of what it was when it first opened and for its first 5 years of operation.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so sad to see, but it was what happened is that
Yeah.
the world was at war and people
Yes.
were
Yeah.
no longer interested in listening to somebody talk about, you
Yeah.
know, hyper discernment and hyper intuition and,
Mm.
seeing distant in space time and all that kind of stuff, or, meditation or yoga or anything else, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was interesting to see all of that. I'm not sure why I went down that rabbit hole with you, but anyway.
Yeah. We were talking about
We're-
your training. You've trained a lot of people now in remote viewing, haven't you? I think I saw or heard you talk, and this was probably a few years ago. I thought I heard you mention something like 10,000 people, but that was a few years ago.
Oh no, it's either just shy of 30K now
Yeah,
or slightly over 30K because
that's awesome. Yeah,
last 10 years I just didn't count and didn't look.
yeah, that's a
Now
huge
the
amount.
people I'm teaching are I'm working kind of exclusively with a friend, William Lamb, and his company called Upgrade, UPGRD
Yeah,
is his trademark name for this, which is real. It's NLP, but it's really high grade NLP. He spent probably 5 years going to practitioners all
okay, yeah,
over the globe to learn very advanced techniques from them and to
yeah,
synthesize those and to bring them back into into the market that he was going for, which are entrepreneurs. And so his his people that buy into his programs
mm,
spend a lot of money to get into those programs,
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of money. And I
awesome.
mean, tens of thousands of dollars. And so
Yes, yeah,
he wanted to put together a branch of the training because he tells them Upgrade would not have happened if I had not gone to a class in Toronto 6 years ago where David was teaching
yeah,
and listened to him talk and inspire the class as to what the applications of this are
yeah,
and how you have to go beyond coordinate remote viewing, that it serves only a single purpose in the
yeah,
training ladder, and that is to shift you from believing to knowing through an
yeah,
empirical analysis of data and correlating data with everybody else in the class. When that happens, you outrun your ability to discount it or minimize it. Whether you're doing well or not so well,
yeah,
that's explained in just cycles of performance, et cetera, et cetera. But when you see what the whole class is doing and you keep listening and you listen to me tell you that nobody in here is better than anybody else,
mm,
nobody in here, we're all gifted with the same ability,
yeah,
but it's all about where you are in your performance curve for this 6 days.
yeah,
And it's about your ability to listen and learn the structure and to, you know,
mm,
look at the collective results, not the individual results,
yes,
and
yeah,
see if that flips a switch in you that takes you from believing in something beyond the physical,
yeah,
or even believing in something beyond the physical and believing that maybe you might be able to interact with it, learn from it, contribute to it, or that you believe there's something beyond the physical, but you don't believe you'll ever interact with it, connect with it, learn from it, or
yes,
contribute to it. It'll take you from whatever that belief structure is that you're standing in, what percentage that might be, and it flips you to the point of transforming from believing to knowing. And
yes,
knowing is the more powerful place to be. But
yeah,
that is
yeah,
all coordinate remote viewing is good for, in my opinion.
yeah,
I hate it. I understand it forward, backward, top
yeah,
to bottom, and bottom to the top. I got it.
yeah,
I wrote the manual for it.
yes, yeah,
But it is an intelligence collection tool
yeah,
designed to make sure that the people doing that
mm,
are all working under the same protocol. They
yeah,
are all generating an identical intelligence collection process report, and then
yes,
the identical summaries. And then the data is correlated
yeah,
into a final summary by a program manager, which goes forward to whomever the intelligence tasker was.
mm,
That's what CRV is. And if you
yes,
think you're going to sit down with coordinate remote viewing and make decisions about how you're going to run your company, you're dreaming. And if anybody's telling you that you can use it for that, then they're
It's
delusional and don't really not understand what
yeah,
it is,
it's
because
great to hear
that's
you.
not the tool it is.
It's absolutely great to hear you say this because, as you know, like yourself, I started off many years doing CRV, but I found that 12 years ago, when people wanted to start to pay me to do remote viewing work, CRV didn't work for that. I had to, for each project, like when I'm looking at financials and crypto markets, I had to find new tools that worked alongside what I learned with CRV to get me that information. So it was really good to hear you saying this. So I know you do teach CRV, but do you teach other methods beyond that now? I know you teach ERV, or you used to teach ERV as well.
I
Uh,
still do. And that
Excellent.
is the next logical progression, because CRV is devoid of the structure of CRV.
Yeah.
And ERV employs things called seed questions and focus questions.
Yeah.
And you learn nonlinear mind mapping. You learn how to utilize the focus questions to explore a target and come back and capture in a nonlinear mind map all of the data that you perceived, and how to clump it together to create sentences and to create paragraphs that are used in your summary. So and as I explain to people, what that does is it begins to broaden your horizon. Okay. Now, not devoid of 98% of the structure that CRV dictates. Now you're doing it without that structure in a theta brainwave state, laying on a mattress on the floor, covered with a blanket with a pillow and blindfold on. Totally different cool down process. Done in theta, not in alpha. And when you master that, the next thing you go to is thought incubation. Thought incubation individual, thought incubation as a business or as a group, which is, it's next generation brainstorming. And it's outside the understanding of anybody about what it actually is, but it's extraordinarily powerful work that as I teach, this is the tool that you can use as an individual, and this is the tool for self-exploration, and the tool that you can use collectively in your business to decide, to problem solve,
Yeah.
to identify new directions, new horizons, new products, new whatever it might be. That you can do with this tool, but it takes these other tools to get you to this place. Otherwise, you don't understand where the information's coming from,
Yeah.
or why it's there. You don't trust it. You don't trust the system. You don't trust the voice. You don't trust how you're receiving the information, or how you're, detecting, decoding, or objectifying the information. And you have to be able to understand. You have to have the basics of the physics. You have to have which I would teach. You have to have the understanding of why structure at level one, what the transformation is, why, all the why and the philosophy and the education to get you to each new level. And the idea is, what happens in this process, where you want to be in this process, is not thinking that in any way, shape, or form that you have to sit down, take coordinates, and engage in a protocol.
Yeah.
If you move through this training ladder in the appropriate way with good teachers, where you're going to be is you're going to find yourself standing with one foot in the physical world and one foot in the non-physical world. And when you're standing squarely, one foot here, one foot there, now you are hyper intuitive, hyper discerning. Now you have, about 14 other things that I can name that become part of your makeup, part of who you are, how you see the world, interact with the world, other people, etc. And that is an empowered place to be. And if you're talking about using it as a tool for you and as a tool for your work, to be an innovator, a creator, an entrepreneur, a boss, or whatever you're going to be. I don't care if you're selling tires or if you're selling upgrade, whatever you're going to do, those are the tools you can use, but you have to do the step by step. And
Yes.
with Upgrade, I'm teaching hedge fund managers and I'm teaching entrepreneurs like, that have huge successful. One of my friends in at Dalton, he sells a particular product, and his business is valued at $1 billion now.
Wow. Yeah.
And but even they're goddamn impatient. He's like, well, why can't we just jump up to thought incubation? I go,
Yeah.
you need to listen to what I say when I'm
Yes.
saying it to you. There isn't a jump from here to there. You don't just come out of the blocks and end up at the finish line. You have to run the race. You have to put one foot in front of the other, and you have to make the effort to get from there to here. There is learning that is necessary at each step of the process. That's why it's there.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. It's great to hear you talk about these things, because there is I don't know if you're aware of this, there is a standing within the general remote viewing community, especially on social media and places, that there's a stance between a lot of people, and some of them are ex-Stargate viewers, that remote viewing has to stay the same as how Ingo taught it to them in 1986, and no one's allowed to make any changes to it, because that would wreck the structure of it, and it would ruin the efficiency of it, which I'm totally against, and I'm called a heretic because I've made changes because some changes to CRV didn't work for me, but I added things like yourself, in 2004. I found that stage 5 didn't work for me. It was too wordy. I couldn't work out what was a topic or what was an object and so on. So I literally replaced the entire stage 5 for mind mapping. And mind mapping for a creative person like myself works beautifully. But I'm classed by like the Ingo Swan people like Paul Smith and the others. I'm classed now as a heretic within RV because of making changes. So it's nice to hear that you've made changes and you've gone well beyond what we did with CRV and ERV, and taking it into the new directions as well.
Yeah, it's difficult to deal with some of my former colleagues, but here's you need to understand a playing field too. Pardon me. Ingo Swan, who I knew very well and spent a lot of time when I resigned from the Army, in my first job was at a literary agent, and my job was to be a reader of perspective, books, and to tell authors yay or nay and tell them why, or to go to the agent and say, this has merit and I think you should take it. But that was my first. But my boss, Sandra, she knew Ingo Swan very well. And so I spent a bunch of time with Ingo and Sandra. I fixed every toilet in that guy's brownstone. Three toilets.
I've used those toilets. I was invited there for a day or so in 2011.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, he told me that he stopped training Ed Dames at stage 3.
Yeah.
When I asked why, he said, because I thought I was just wasting my time. Now that's how Ingo talked about people. I'm sure that when I turned around, even after fixing a toilet and, overhauling a toilet, don't even ask me how I know how to do that, but overhauling a toilet, my father taught me how to do everything. So, I'm sure that when I walked around the corner, he turned around and, went, that fucking Morehouse, kind of thing. It's just, that's how he was. When he got mouth cancer, Sandra just went, now that figures, like that figures. If he was going to get it, that would be it. That was because he smoked Tiparillo cigarettes.
He did continuously. Yeah.
One after the other.
Yeah.
But I was, when you were in the unit, nobody walked up and said like, hey, my name's Paul Smith, and I've only been trained to stage 3. See, I was trained all the way to stage 7, and I just opted not to do 7 because it was so ridiculous in my opinion. Stage 7 was considered a phonetic stage.
Yes.
You're supposed to loosen your vocal cords and huff air out, and the monitor would listen to the sounds to see if you were able to name a street or a country or or a
Correct. Yeah.
village or something. And I was just like, I'm not doing that. I sound like a seal, and I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, but I found, Paul Smith told somebody he was only trained to stage 3,
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
only stage
Bingo.
3.
Yeah. Yeah.
And well, he wasn't trained by anybody else to do anything else. And I can tell you, I looked at every session he did in the unit, because everybody's training sessions and operational sessions were all in the unit, in the files. And you were encouraged to go look at them if you wanted to. And so I looked in the 3 years I was there at every file, every session done by every person before me and who were there with me. And, I saw everybody's, from McMonagle's to Skip's Atwater's efforts to, Fern Gavin's efforts, to everybody. So I knew that I never saw anything from Paul that went past stage 3. I mean, he had like 6-page sessions. They weren't 25-page sessions or anything like that.
Yeah.
He was good, but
I've never,
no better than anybody else.
in the entire Stargate archives that I've got, I've never seen and I've got all Ingo's training sessions as well. I've never seen a CRV session go 25 pages.
Well, they do in my classes.
Yeah, yeah, and the excellent example in your book as well. That's a stunning example in that book there. Yeah,
But what was, just the other thing about the 10,000 pages or so that you have, or 100,000 pages,
110,000. Yeah,
10,700 and something documents, right? Is that it?
yeah, it's about 11,000 documents. There's loads of memos in there and blank pages and stuff as well. Yeah, there's a lot of mess in there as well.
That probably represents about 2% of what was in the historical files of the organization.
Yeah,
And it was stuff that was released by the CIA. And it is not the Central Information Agency, it's the Central Intelligence Agency. If their mouth is moving, you need to understand that they're telling you something because they want to spin something. They want you to believe something. They're not trying to keep the public informed about what was going on there or what the validity of it. Because remember, in 95, when they knew that Psychic Warrior was going to be published and that they could not stop it despite their best efforts, that's when they started releasing information, because tell your version of the story first.
yes,
And tell it in a way that you want the public to perceive it. That, yeah, we did this. We only did it for 20 years, which is untrue. And we only spent, this many millions of dollars on it, which was not the actual figure. And and we only found it to be, 18 or 15 or 20% accurate. Therefore, it was of no intelligence value to us, and we're canceling it now. That is keeping somebody between you and the problem. That is putting your version of the story out first, so you can sell the public on what you want them to believe. That is what the CIA does. It's their MO. They neither confirm nor deny, but if they are going to confirm something, then they're going to tell the story they want you to believe. They are not going to tell you a story that is all forthcoming and all accurate, portrays a perfect picture of what it was. If it was only 20% and if it was worthless, it would have never stayed alive as long as it did. They would not have continued to put money into it. They would not have continued to task it for intelligence. They had the chief science of the Defense Intelligence Agency's Directorate of Technology and Science, Dr. Jack Verona, was the head of the program. Not Dale Graff, not anybody else, not Fern Gavin. Fern Gavin is a program manager.
yes,
And Dale Graff, whatever role he played at the DIA, last time I saw him, they had taken Fern Gavin, and who was a good guy, and pushed him out of his office. And all he did was sit in the lobby reading a newspaper every day till he retired. That's what he told me. Fern said that to me. And Dale, the last time I saw him, was wearing a wizard hat at a party in the unit, right? They're all for he's wearing a wizard hat. And so I'm like, shit, I just came by to say, hey, before I leave to go to Command and General Staff College,
Yeah.
sorry I stopped by.
Yeah.
Because it was not how I wanted to remember the place.
Yes.
So what was released to tell a specific story.
Yes.
And McMoneagle, Atwater, and Smith, I know, were part of the go through with the CIA desk, that was managing it, and saying what should be released and what shouldn't be released, etc.
Yeah.
There are no operational targets that were released. If there are any operational targets that were released, they only had like 1 or 2 viewers or maybe 3 viewers working on them. Yeah. And then they were selective about the story they were telling about different viewers, right? Mm-hmm. So trying to undermine this viewer, undermine that viewer, pump up this viewer, because look, it was their chance to tell the story. Yeah, Atwater, McMoneagle, and Smith, they were telling the story they wanted told about the organization, about who should be seen as good and who should be seen as not so good, kind of thing. But I will tell you, the finest remote viewer that was ever produced out of that place was Mel Riley. Okay. Bar none, better than anybody else in terms of just his product, his levels of accuracy, his humility, right? Yep. His willingness to just serve, and to be there and to be that. He never wanted to write a book. He didn't want to be part of a book. He was never beating his chest about anything. He just loved coming to work, and he loved the time that it afforded him in between training sessions, calibration sessions, or operational sessions to work on his Indian, artwork, his artwork stuff that he worked on. Yeah. So he was the most amazing. Ed Smith, Ed Dames, prone to AOL, but was a meticulous viewer. He really believed in it and worked diligently at it. Yeah. Gabriel Pettengale, the same. Joe McMoneagle was no better than anybody else, but he was good at what he did. Skip Atwater was there as a monitor, not as a viewer, but he got viewing training and did work there, and his sessions were in there as well. Not very many, but they were there. Yeah. Mel Riley, hundreds of sessions. And me, I was only there for 3 years because I had no intention of going there and dropping anchor for 10 years. Yeah. Or 15 years and spending, 3/4 of a 20-year career being in that place. My God, who would do that? Yeah, I need to get back, command troops, go to commander. I was selected for Command and General Staff College. I wanted to do those things, not stay there.
Did you ever meet Angela Ford?
Her name was Angela De La Fiora.
When she was there, yeah.
She was there, and Robin Dahlgren was her partner in
because in like the remote viewing kind of like history that's been put out there, they've been very much like yourself, really, misaligned by some of the more vocal people in the remote viewing community. And I have to be honest, I've since learned from talking to them and seeing the data that I've seen, not only from Stargate, but from people like Ingo Swan with his entire SRI archives and training sessions, all that kind of stuff, that a lot of what we were told in the remote viewing community by these so-called leaders was in fact not any, there's no truth to it at all. And I have to be honest, and I probably should apologize to you, really, because for many years I've always kind of stayed a distance from talking to you, because I did believe at the time some of the stupid things that I was probably told when I, like many people out there, have been manipulated by some of these more vocal people in the past. So, I want to say that to you, that I do believe that you've been misaligned out there. You've done great work. Your books are absolutely fantastic resources that put many people on the path to finding remote viewing. So yeah, I just wanted to get that out there for the people that watching this, really.
No, I appreciate that. But the truth is that I violated a secrecy oath. Yeah. and I wrote a book about an organization that I was part of. The gist of the book was misinterpreted by people like Paul Smith and Joe McMoneagle. But the truth of the matter was, it wasn't so much to them that I wrote the book. What pissed them off is that they didn't write the book. In fact, Lynn Buchanan told me that the first words out of Paul Smith's mouth when he found out about it was, I wanted to write that book. So they should all thank me, because I was the first guy through the brick wall and took all the hits for it.
You took the hits.
And every one of them, including Dale Graff, Joe McMoneagle, Skip Atwater, Ed Dames now, Lynn Buchanan, and Paul Smith, they've all written books now.
Yes.
So yay. But I've never gotten a phone call from any of them to say, hey, thanks, Dave. I never expected it. I never expected it either. But people thought that I wrote the book for other reasons, and it was so wrong how it was interpreted by people. Like, he thinks that it damaged him or mentally. It was like, no, that had nothing to do with anything. Look, the original manuscript was 740 pages. It was cut down in 2 or 3 weekends by my editor, Sean Coyne, and his assistant, because I don't know what it is, 283 or something. Why? Because of my second book. It was the first attempt at writing, a nonfiction novel, more or less, just telling a story kind of in that way, novelistically, but as nonfiction. And they were like, we're not going to publish 740 pages. But you cut all these explanations for the stuff you've left in, you cut it all out. And they're like, that's our job. I'm the editor. I'm your editor. That's what I'm going to do.
Have you ever thought about a special edition maybe one day?
I never read it. I never read it at all.
I was just thinking maybe a special edition version one day would go down quite well with the broader community now.
No, there's probably stuff in there I probably don't want to say now. Over the years, you think and rethink things, and you understood things to be one way at the time, and now you understand them to be a different at the time, at this time. And there was I was really in a down spot. Not when I got out of there, made the decision to write the book. When I made the decision to write the book, I wrote it for a very specific purpose. I believed that because of the transformation that happened in me, I became hyper intuitive and hyper discerning. I became, where I knew I was walking, 1 foot in the physical and 1 foot in the non-physical. I began to see through the veneers on things, mostly people. Yeah. And in being an Army officer at Commander General Staff College, a staff group of 24, and you just are, you're feeling things at a different level than I ever would. I was the distinguished honor graduate of every school I ever went to in the military. Yes. And that means Ranger School, Jump School, Infantry Motor Platoon Leaders course, Infantry Officer Basic course, Pathfinder course, Jump Master School, Infantry Officers Advanced course, right on down the line. Every course that I ever was, I was number 1 in the class. At Commander General Staff College, I was not. I pursued 2 master's degrees while I was there, but I did not. I didn't, rise to the top because I was conflicted about certain things, about people in the staff group, or things we were being asked to study, or other things. And when I got to the 82nd Airborne Division, when I was the Battalion XO for 2nd Battalion 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, I once again excelled in all of that. But then, when I was a battalion commander there, I was an interim commander. So I had not yet been promoted to lieutenant colonel, and I had not been selected for battalion command, but the battalion commander was outgoing, and before the other one came in, which was going to be several months, I became the interim commander. But still, I took the battalion on our RTEP and other kinds of things. I was the commander.
Yes.
And from there, I was being asked to come up to the Division G3 office to be one of 3 Iron Majors waiting to get promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and selected for battalion command. So as an Iron Major, you have ops, training, and plans. And I was the training Iron Major, just the 3 of us. We ran the division, basically. We had a Lieutenant Colonel that we answered to, but I ran training in the division. And, Bren was in charge of operations, and Tony was in charge of plans. Both those guys went on to become 1 or 2 star generals. I think Tony ended up actually being a 3-star general.
Okay.
And while we were there doing all of that, the guy that was the division commander, and this is what happened there, is this division commander and I did not get along. I didn't like this guy. And because I didn't like him, he didn't like me. Yeah. And that's not a good position to be in as a major and, facing a 2-star general. But I couldn't help myself. You see, something had happened back in the remote viewing unit when I transformed and stopped believing and knew what I was part of, and knew what I could do with that, how I could add to it and learn from it. I just couldn't get myself to be what I used to be in uniform, which was, yes, sir, whatever you need, yes, sir. And you're a 2-star, so whatever you need. That's not a healthy position to be in, in the Army. This particular 2-star at the time, because I was the training officer, I owned all the ranges. I was responsible for all the ranges. And I got, of course, this radio call one day when I was walking around talking to S3s and battalions. And I got a radio call that said that there had been an accident on a particular range at Fort Bragg, and that there was a fatality there. And so when I got back to my office, the chief of staff of the 82nd comes down to my office, Caravori, and he says, "Hey, I need to see you in my office." I go up there, and in the office is the aide to the 2-star. And he goes, Colonel Caravori said, "Tell him what you told me." So what he tells me is the CG was on the range, and the CG had listened to the scheme of maneuver on this live fire range, and that the battalion commander and a company commander had approved for a platoon, and he nixed it and said, "No, you don't do that. You do this." And he directed the scheme of maneuver, which was then relayed to the platoon. And when the platoon crossed the line of departure, started in a platoon movement to contact. Long story shortened considerably, a soldier, a senior non-commissioned officer, the platoon sergeant, was shot by his own machine gun in the upper torso, in the head, killed instantly on the spot. The aide told me what he had already told the chief, which was, as soon as that happened, the CG got back in his Humvee and went back, and on the ride back, he says, "I didn't say anything and I wasn't there." To which the aide then came to the chief of staff when he got back and said, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because surely somebody's going to ask me, and I don't want to lie about that, because he was there and he did stop the scheme of maneuver and did something else." Yes. Caravori says to me, this guy, the 2-star, did the same thing when he was a lieutenant colonel. The same range, the same scheme of maneuver, and a platoon sergeant was killed like 10 meters away from where this guy just got killed today. Wow. Yeah. So Caravori and I decided that we were not going to be supportive of this commanding general and of his when the Article 15.6 investigation came, which there's an investigating officer that comes in and looks at everything.
Yes.
I was not going to be supportive. I was not going to color this in his favor, and I was going to bring up the previous one, which, as a battalion commander, he was somebody's boy at that time, meaning somebody was going to usher him along to be a general officer. And so he was exonerated in that one, despite the fact that the very same thing happened. I just couldn't see supporting it this way. And so, but long story short, he was exonerated in this one because he was the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division. They were not going to nail this guy to the floor.
Yeah.
But instead, they fired the battalion commander, and they fired the company commander, and they fired the platoon leader and the senior non-coms for each one of those positions, except the platoon leaders was dead, and they did that. So that is what caused this huge riff. And so when a complaint was made against me, which was later proven to be baseless, without merit, and with no credible evidence, all of these charges were stacked up.
Yes.
And they do that just to see what they can eventually make stick. And this is where the idea came. It's like, okay, and Caravori received a negative efficiency report, or an efficiency report from the commanding general that would make sure that Caravori would never get a star, which is not something that chiefs of staff of the 82nd Airborne don't get. If you're the chief of staff of the 82nd Airborne Division, you're going to get a star. You're going to come back as the DCO or the DCS, deputy chief of operations or support. And so it just became a very convenient thing for them now, because I'm writing a book. They know about it. The CG now knows about it because the intel community was telling him. The CG has a bone to pick with me because, I basically testified in writing against him, as did Caravori, but I was still there, and Caravori was forced out. And so charges were placed against me. I went after those for a year because they were ludicrous and they were unfounded. But I went after those, and then, they just kept looking for other things to add on to it. And my attorneys at the time said, hey, you can resign, you can resign and get out of here. There are people supporting you that know you, that, that are 4-star generals and 3-star generals, and, that know you from Ranger Regiment and know you from Panama and know you, from special access programs that you're in. They're supporting you. They're behind you. They can't interfere with the court-martial convening authority, this 2-star, but you can resign.
Yes.
So I resigned, and the 2-star put in the recommendation of the Secretary of the Army that I be given an other than honorable discharge.
Yes.
That is not a dishonorable discharge. Dishonorable discharge means that you have been convicted of a felony, and therefore, being convicted of a felony, you have been given a dishonorable discharge. And other than honorable means that we have put charges against you, but we're going to let you walk out the door. And we're not going to relieve the charges, but we'll let you walk out the door because of your past performance in service. So that is what happened. And I was given an OTH. And they don't allow you to do that if they think they can prove it and win. Right? And what my attorney, he was a former military judge, said, he goes, you need to take this opportunity and go. He goes, I'm going to tell you exactly what I know is going to happen. He said, they are trying to get you to stand up and face these charges, which are ridiculous. Adultery. I was legally separated from my wife. The woman that I was dating was legally separated from her husband. But the Army has a different condition for that. See, if you're legally separated, you could go to the movies together Now, you can go to dinner together, but if there is any rumor or evidence of intimacy, now
Yeah.
you can be charged with adultery.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so there it goes, right?
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was Barry, my attorney, said, he goes, they're going to try to get you in the courtroom because they know that you and I believe that this will be beaten, that a jury of your peers are not going to destroy your career because of that. He said, but once they get you in the court martial doing that, they can now add more charges. And he goes, and they're going to come after you for dereliction of duty, wrongful disclosure of classified information.
Right.
Because what you did in the book that you wrote. And he goes, and how will you plead to that? My father was standing right next to me. I go, well, clearly guilty. I wrote the book. So,
Yeah.
it's getting ready to be published, in 6 months. And he goes, okay, and you plead guilty to that. A jury of your peers for that
Yes.
will find you guilty. And he goes, you could do jail time for that if you
Wow. Yep.
if they bring this in. He goes, get the hell out. So I did. And years later, I went back before the Army Discharge Review Board.
Yep.
You stand before 5 colonels and you plead the case that was never heard before. And it's only about 1% of those cases that are ever reversed.
Yes.
And it is even less than 1% of the cases that are unanimously reversed. So I was given an honorable discharge and reinstated by 5 colonels unanimously in that vote. And the accompanying document said that having reviewed service member's case, that we feel that the case against a service member was given the wrong discharge, and that the cases and the allegations against him were baseless, without merit, and with no credible evidence.
Yeah.
That said, I know that Paul Smith hands people a jump drive with court-martial documents on it.
Well, we're on camera saying this, so I don't know if I should really. Because as I've discussed, I'm a bit of a historian of remote viewing data. I was given a copy of your entire court trial transcripts by a person quite a few years ago, as you just said.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, now you know the story.
Yeah.
So I don't care about any of that, because it did not defeat me. They did not defeat me.
Yeah.
It was a low point in my life, for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, my efficiency reports read destined to wear stars. My efficiency reports from general officers said that. In fact, one general officer said, we'll be chief of staff of our Army one day.
Yeah.
And, I made my choices.
Yes.
I did what I did. And I endured the consequences.
Yes.
And I took it like a man, even though it was devastating to me to have to do that in that way.
Yep.
Devastating. Real low points in my life.
Yeah.
But,
I think that definitely comes across in Psychic Warrior. You can see the trouble, the mental kind of troubles you're going through. It's quite shocking that they didn't really. I mean, with your troubles of writing the book and stuff, there are also other things as well. They didn't really prepare anyone that was going through the remote viewing training to deal with the the consequences of what that does. How it changes a person. I don't think very well.
Well, that's been one of my. That's a common question, and that is what I share with people. Is that, look, I was the only combat arms officer ever to be recruited into the organization. I was the only special operations combat arms officer to be recruited into that organization. I was the only, combat arms special operations officer who had commanded 2 companies, an airborne rifle company for 2 years and a ranger company for 2 years. I had 4 years of company command. No one else there ever commanded a SHU
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Most of them had never even been platoon leaders. They were
Yeah.
certainly never company commanders, and they never commanded a battalion. They never did any of those things. They were not leaders. And they all had a self-proclaimed propensity for clairvoyance and clairvoyant work. That's why they were there.
Yeah.
That's how they got recruited.
Yeah.
I never made that claim.
Mhm.
I never once ever said that I was clairvoyant or,
Yeah.
that I clairaudient, clairsentient, anything.
Yeah.
I made no claim of anything like that at all. I mean, I was trained as an engineer with a minor in physics. And I chose to go in the Army and do the jobs that I chose to do because I wanted to be that kind of guy. I wanted to be, if I was going to be in the Army and put a uniform on, I wanted to do the hardest, most dangerous jobs
Yeah.
that existed, and I did, and I loved it. Those are the greatest years of my life. I mean, I'd do it again for free if they take an old man,
Yeah.
which they won't. But they were cut from a different bolt of cloth
Yeah.
than me, and I wanted to get in there, do the work that I was asked to do. I did. I did it well. I learned the protocol fast. I jumped into the next protocol. I wanted to get out, and I wanted to get out and go do something else, another SAP, which I did. I went to another special access program, and I had to go to Command and General Staff College because I'd been selected for that, and you don't turn that down. And then I wanted to get back to troops. I mean, shit, I had spent so much time away from soldiers, Daz, that, because being in Torn Image, Royal Cape, the Secret Army of Northern Virginia, which was my first place, first special access program, that's not with being with soldiers. It's a purple assignment with joint guys from all over the place. And we wore suits to work and grew our hair long. And then to be in the remote viewing unit for 3 years, that's certainly not like being in the Army. Everybody's wearing civilian clothes all the time, and then when I went to Torn Image, same idea, the strategic deception unit.
Yeah.
So by the time I was going back to Command and General Staff College, the Army in its wisdom, because my alternate specialty was 41, which is personnel manager, they sent me to the infantry officer assignment branch, where I dealt with lieutenants as a major, and I had to get re-greened. I had to learn to put my uniform on again.
Yeah.
Quite seriously, I had to learn to put a uniform on. Everything had changed from vehicles to radios to even different weapons now. And I had to learn everything again before I went to Command and General Staff College.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was a big eye opener, and
Yeah.
I know that they were doing what they were doing. I've heard about that over the years many times, and at least one is still doing it. And friends tell them to go stuff it. Won't take that stuff from them, even though offered up. And some have taken it from them and then thought they were now in the inner circle, only to be betrayed by them in some way or another.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman in Germany by the name of Theo that would tell you that. You should have him on your show if you haven't.
Me and Theo have had lots of conversations. There are several others as well.
Yeah. And so, Theo just wrote me because I was, for the first time in 26 years, about 5 months ago, invited to speak at IRVA.
Yes.
I'd actually been asked to speak at IRVA for many years, probably 20 years.
Yep.
And I would never speak there. I would always say, not until the individual that's on your board who betrayed me and attempted to even betray my family. And for all I know, he tried to have Psychic Warrior stopped, and he was active in a lot of other negative stuff and still is. And I said, if that individual is there, I will never come there. Why would I come there? I don't even want to be in the same space with that guy. I mean, first of all, I'd probably punch him in the throat, if I got close enough to him. I mean,
Yeah.
I still have that dark side. I might do that.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Please don't anybody think I would. I wouldn't do it, but I would sure think about it. In
Yes.
my
Yeah.
mind's eye, I would do it.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, I just, talking with you about this is more than I have talked about it in 30 years.
Wow. Yeah. As I said, I haven't had it as bad as you have, and I'm lucky to, um, because I wasn't trained by the people that we're talking about. I'm a bit of a person in between. I have access to a lot, all people and all camps, and because there's lots of tribes. Tribes is the best way to say it. So I get to hear a lot of backstories, and like yourself, I've seen a lot of over the years. I've seen a lot of toxicity and a lot of manipulation is the best way to say it. There's been a lot of toxic manipulation by some of the people that we've mentioned that have that's done so much damage over the years. It's really divisive, and once you remove those people, good things happen. People start talking, they start working
Yeah.
together. Things happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally, I haven't had it nowhere near as bad as you have, but I have seen it, and I've seen it happen to you, and I stood by and watched it happen. That's why I apologize, because now with full knowledge and with my eyes open, I actually understand who the manipulators were and what they were doing. I don't know why they were doing it. Um,
I know why they were doing it. It is, look again, Daz, these guys came into those organizations. They were of no value back in the other organizations in the Army. They came there, with stated clairvoyant capabilities. And so they were hired, trained and hired there. And it became ego that was feeding everything that was happening for them. They are armed with this knowledge of this capability and this work being done in support of the intelligence collection capabilities of the U.S. government. And when they step out of, they were in many ways in dealing with the same kinds of things that I was, but they had already had a professed ability. So I'm not so sure they felt this giant awakening, which was confusing to them. This transformation was confusing to them. They were just collecting, how good they were and, what they had done and building their own version of heroics and all of that so that they could step out. I mean, look, Joe McMoneagle and Skip Outwater were P&G at the unit when I was there. Why? Because they both stepped out and authored a book called Mind Trek.
yes.
And when they authored that book, the unit, everyone in the unit and up, saw it as a marginal exposure of what was going on in the unit, because it wouldn't take anybody with two brain cells to rub together too long before they realized that INSCOM's sending people to Monroe Institute. These guys come out of some secret unit, and now they're, Joe McMoneagle has married Robert Monroe's daughter and brings Skip on to be the operations guy. And, they're doing all this stuff, and they write a book called Mind Trek. They knew that it was going to start sinking in that these guys came from that unit, and this is kind of what they did without them actually using the term remote viewing. So, I mean, people there would not talk about them or to them in anything but disparaging words. I'm talking about Joe and Skip.
Yes.
I was the dumbass. I mean, I didn't know anything about these guys. I'd never read the book. I didn't know anything about psychic ability. I was just me, a Ranger Commander that here I am now. And it was interesting to see and hear that. But now all of a sudden, all those guys that have been in there, they started deciding who they're in their own mind, who the heroes were going to be in that and who weren't. And so, they excluded a large number of people. They excluded Ed, partly self-inflicted gunshot wound in Ed's part. And, they kind of cut Mel Riley to the fringes and never
Yeah.
talked about what he was really like. Lynn Buchanan,
Yep.
pushed off into a corner as, marginal and
Yep.
that kind of stuff, which Lynn was extraordinarily good at some aspects of it and, and not as good in other aspects. He wasn't a really good sketch, but as an empath, being able to understand what somebody was thinking or feeling or the emotions and the aesthetics and the intangible aspects of a target, he was very, very good at that. Extraordinarily good. Gabrielle, of course, she passed away years ago,
Yep.
but she was never held up as being a stalwart in that. So the egos, the big egos, were the ones that you still see as big egos, right?
Yes. Yep.
And they don't care. They're small in the respect that they only care about appearing that they are better than somebody else by standing on somebody else's shoulders.
Yes.
And I see that as the mark of a reactive, poor performing, small person.
Yeah.
Rather than in their good graces,
Yes.
talking honestly about what everybody was,
Yeah.
and that it was never about any one single individual. And
Absolutely.
you never trust the remote viewing results of a single
Single
remote
person.
viewer
Yeah.
operating independently of other remote viewers.
Yeah.
I made that rule up, not them.
Yeah.
And remote viewing is not 100% accurate. It never has been.
No.
It never will be. And remote viewing was never intended to be used as a standalone endeavor. It had to always be used in consonance with other investigative collection methodologies, whatever it might be.
Yep.
And it was as accurate and held its own for decades with every other intelligence collection methodology. There are some 34, 35 intelligence collection methodologies now.
Wow. Yeah.
And none of them, Daz, are 100% accurate.
No. Yep.
Not one. Why? They're all subject to human interpretation.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't care if it's cyber intelligence. I don't care if it's satellite, signal intelligence or photo intelligence. I don't care if it's human intelligence. I don't care what it is. From wherever it comes, it is evaluated, it is analyzed by a human being.
Yeah.
Oftentimes multiple human beings. So there's always something lost in transmission. Things get left behind.
Yeah.
Sometimes the correlations of the data are good and they're there, and then they go higher. And when they go higher, then somebody else looks at the information and decides if it's good or it's actionable or it's not or something else. It's meshed with other intelligence collection products.
Yes.
Nowadays, they don't even decide. It used to be that a collection manager, when the tasker came in from a customer, a request for intelligence, they could select who they were going to send it to. SIGINT, ELINT, FODINT, HUMINT, SCIENT, whatever it's going to be. Now they use what is called all source. It's an automatic, unless there's a real exception. And all source means it goes to everybody, and it's all pulled back in again, and it's compiled and and correlated all the way up until it gets amassed into the intelligence product. So if you understand that, and you understand that anybody saying that it never produced actionable intelligence or that it was never, really highly accurate, it was as highly accurate as anything else.
As anything else. Yeah.
Your country and mine went to war in Iraq based on two pieces of human intelligence. Okay? And a photograph a sat photo that we weren't really sure where it ever came from, that Colin Powell briefed.
Yeah.
So, none of that was accurate.
No.
But you never hear that comparison made. But
Absolutely.
none of the intelligence collection methodologies are 100% accurate. Remote viewing served its purpose. It was good. It was trustworthy. And it had its ups and downs.
Yes.
And I've heard some guy like I think May. I think his name is May.
Dr. Edwin May?
Yeah, I think so. I think I heard him. I hope I'm right. I know I heard him, I hope I have the right guy, is what I should say. I know what the words were. Uh, he worked at SRI. He did
He
not
did.
work in the unit.
Yeah.
In fact, to my knowledge, never even happened in the unit. Never even
I
showed
believe
up.
so. I believe he never went there or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of those guys, even like John Alexander,
Hmm.
John Alexander was not allowed in the unit.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, Fern Gavin said if he ever knocks on the door, you don't open the door. You just
Yeah.
leave him standing out there. He does
Mhm.
not belong here. And he has
Yes.
no reason to be in here. I don't give a shit who knows him or thinks they know him or who he thinks he knows. He is not allowed in this building.
Yeah.
But that guy is, again, made a living off of
Yes.
talking about who he is and what he was with this
Yeah.
organization unit and other stuff, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
But this guy has out of SRI said he stood there flat-footed on camera and said no actionable intelligence was ever produced by the remote viewing unit.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, first of all, how the hell would you know?
Mm.
Since you were never allowed in the unit and you worked at SRI International, you didn't
Yes.
work at DIA and you didn't work at the CIA and you did not review the intelligence product of that organization.
Yes.
Secondly, how do you know they never produced actionable intelligence? Were you briefed on all of the operations that they worked, like Flight 803 Pan Am over Lockerbie, Scotland? In fact, the remote viewing unit was the first unit to identify the explosives being placed in a boombox,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that there was a backup explosion detonator, which were three C4 candy bars in wrappers called Berg chocolate, which nobody knew what that meant or what it was
Yeah.
in those days. Gold wrapper, brown, brown
Yep.
paper.
Yep.
It was a woman, an elderly woman whose family was shot out of the sky by a U.S. missile frigate when an Iranian airliner was heading out over the Gulf.
Yep.
That missile frigate misinterpreted the radar signature and thought that it may have been an Iranian fighter coming to attack them. And
Yes.
it
Yep.
did not respond to their hail. And when
Mhm.
it did not, they fired and shot it down and killed everybody on board.
Yes.
If the bomb below in the cargo hold did not go off,
Mhm.
she was going to detonate. And it
Right.
was
Yep.
before they ever checked for stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah.
The remote viewing unit did that.
Yep.
I guess the letter that we got from the DEA,
Mhm.
wherein the remote viewing unit determined that there was an assemblage of two freighters that came out of Ecuador that had illicit drugs, cocaine, hidden on board, but they were splitting up. But the remote viewing unit saw them linking back up together to the northeast of Hawaii with a third freighter, and cross-loading into the third freighter, which was outside of the satellite footprint
Mhm.
by
Yeah.
the U.S. And that third freighter was then going to take off and deliver the cargo wherever it was
Okay.
delivered. The DEA, along with the U.S. Navy, conducted an interdiction and
Yeah.
caught all three of them sitting there transloading. And it was one of the biggest busts that the DEA ever made. So I guess when the DEA sent in a letter to the unit thanking everyone in the unit for what they did and sending everybody challenge coins, you know what those are?
Yep.
Funny, Lynn Buchanan thought they were medals. I go, Lynn, these are the coins that guys put between the crack of their ass. And you walk into the shower because you know nobody else is going to have their challenge coin. You squat down and drop the coin because that's called coin challenge. So if you drop your coin and nobody else has their coin in the shower,
Mhm.
they all have to buy drinks.
Excellent.
So he didn't know, he had not been in units that had those kinds of things, challenge coins.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
sent those. And so I guess, the DEA was just doing it because sitting around one day and I don't know,
Yeah.
just thought they'd write a needless letter thanking an organization,
Yeah.
that provided them intelligence that assisted them in bringing that down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the guy that said what he said clearly has no
Yeah.
business.
They're definitely. I mean, as I said, I've read all the files and stuff. They're being an outsider looking at I brought this. I have actually interviewed Ed and I actually brought this up with him and said it several times. I clearly see that there was a disconnect between what they were doing at SRI and what you guys were doing. In in the Stargate and associated project names, because you were doing the operational work and they were doing the science and the testing work for it. So yeah, there's no way that he would have been able to or have access to those high level operations to be able
No,
to evaluate them.
he would not. He would have never been read onto that.
Yeah.
But there was animosity there because
Yes. Yes.
there were three major deliverables in the contract.
Yeah.
One was scientifically prove yes or no, do humans have this ability,
Yeah.
and can you identify for us who would have this ability so we
Yes.
can harvest them from the population and train them to utilize them?
Yeah.
And can you replicate this? Meaning that's speak for, can you build a training program?
Yes. Yeah.
So, the science that they came forward with that said, yes, first deliverable, yes. There are many other deliverables, but those are three main ones.
Yes.
Yes, we've scientifically proven that there is a human ability to see distant in space time and to gather and report information.
Yes.
And, okay, great. So the CIA's, they then turned around and they sent two auditing agencies. I think PAIR and SAIC, might have been in somebody else, but PAIR and SAIC to go there to check their science. Because why? Because the CIA is keeping somebody between them and the problem. If this ever blows up, we don't want to be accused of chasing this based on just what this team at SRI International
Yeah.
came up with. They say yes, and the science is sound. All right, let's check it. So apparently it came back with only minor recommendations for changing certain things in their test and evaluation, primarily with how to assign targets and stuff.
Yes.
And then the second deliverable, which came back months later, is probably one of the more poignant, pronouncements out of the contract, wherein Targ and Puthoff said, "We have found that there is nothing unique to any of the research subjects.
Yes.
They all have the ability. And our finding is that everyone has the ability. It is not unique to any one person. Everybody is born with the ability, and all it's required is for them to be curious, to surrender to a process of learning and
Yes.
working with and discovering this inherent gift that all of them have." Oh, well, that was powerful. It meant that they didn't have to go find, 8-year-old kids,
Yeah.
North Dakota somewhere and drag them off to Langley and train them. And then the other one, the third one, which is the one they failed miserably at, which is, can you replicate this? Can you build a training program for this?
Yeah.
Now Ingo Swann tried to get them to
Yes.
accept his training protocols. They don't want to hear it. So they didn't want to hear it. But look, let's review the bidding here. These guys are freaking scientists.
Yeah.
Scientists, mathematicians, psychologists. What do they know about training? They don't know anything about training. To my knowledge, they weren't even professors. They weren't educators in anything. They didn't teach classes in physics or lasers or anything else. They just worked,
Yeah.
setting up experiments, conducting experiments,
Yeah.
collecting, tabulating, and analyzing data. That's what they did.
Yeah.
So the idea, the brio, that you would be able to develop a training program that you were going to give to the military, of all things, was too far of a reach for them. But they refused to accept it.
Yeah.
And, Ingo was clear to me. He goes, I wanted to hit Russell Targ in the head with a hammer every day. Now, he didn't really mean that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But he meant it. He was expressing the level of frustration that he had with that whole thing, which is why Ingo then ended up being the guy that was given the contract to train various cells within the U.S. military.
Yes.
primarily
Yeah.
the Army at INSCOM, that
Yes.
later became part of the DIA. Ingo told me, and he probably told you, that he trained other people.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
I always assumed that was probably the CIA. That was
Mm.
probably a CIA cell. I never heard about a Navy cell. I
Mm.
never heard about an Air Force cell. I know
Yeah.
people popped up on the radar saying, "Oh, I was in the Navy remote viewing cell,"
Yes. Yeah.
but I have no proof of that
Mm.
at all.
Yeah.
And just them saying it, which is
Yeah.
not enough.
He did. He
There
did.
should be documentation about that somewhere.
He did confirm with me that he taught another group, but he told me that because he signed security oaths that he couldn't say anything more than that. 'Cause that's the kind of person he was. He wouldn't break any of his oaths.
No, no, he wouldn't. He
Yeah.
was very diligent about that in honoring that. Um,
Which
you
is
know,
interesting because I don't know if you know this, but one of the well, is he a whistleblower? I guess he is kind of. Lou Elizondo, who came out about he worked for the UAP task force and stuff. He claims in some of his interviews that in the late 80s, um, he was in a different military unit, but he claims that he was actually taught remote viewing by one of the unit people, Gene. I don't know if you knew Gene Lessman at
no,
all. He claims
I
in
heard
the
the name somewhere.
Yeah, he claims he was taught by Gene Lessman, and which is interesting because Gene's not a very well-known person in the public space about remote viewing. So the fact that he's making these claims is kind of interesting because the time he's talking about is 2 years after Gene had actually left the Stargate unit that he claims Gene was teaching him remote viewing. So I find that kind of interesting that I'm looking into right now as well. That there might have been an extra thing going on there that we don't yet know about.
My inclination, my first off inclination is to really look at all of these claims with a cocked eye. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a former Navy SEAL who spent most of his career at in San Diego at Coronado Island, and he was on the BUDS instructor, which is the basic underwater demolition. That's the 3 week part
Yeah.
where they beat the shit out of him, and
I've seen
before
it.
they
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
start SEAL training. And then this guy's his last name is Jaco, Jako, not Jocko, the big podcast guy, Jako. Okay, and he had a website wherein he used the term remote viewer, remote viewing, remote viewing the battlefield, remote viewing business, remote viewing, all these things. So he was giving a lecture in San Diego, and some of my former students went
Yeah.
to listen to it. And he was on that rant about all of that. And, one of the young ladies raised their hand and went, "Where did you learn this?" And he looked at them and said, here or there. And they went, "Well, we've been trained formally by former members of, the CIA DIA unit, and
Yeah.
you don't pick it up here and there. So what do you mean? Can you elaborate on that? Because you're claiming to be a remote viewer and all these different things.
Yeah.
And we just want to understand why you feel qualified to do that." And he skipped around and, deflected and other things because he knew he was caught by people that understood and could
Yes.
define remote viewing and understood that he was just claiming it without ever having been formally trained in it, which is a very common thing today.
It is. Yes.
People
I
will
see it a
do
lot.
that
Yeah.
because they don't think anybody's going to question it. But you have to ask yourself, why would they do that?
Yeah.
They do it because they know that if they claim that they have it and that they know how to roll it into all this other training, and they're from the special operations community, that it carries now, remote viewing carries a level of credibility
Yeah.
that other things don't.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Trans mediums, shamans, I mean, all the other thing. On a Clubhouse, which I used to do like these 12-hour shows on Clubhouse every Friday night when I was doing Clubhouse
Yeah.
years ago. And I'd have, I'd have a guy come on. He'd go, I'm a shaman. I'm a remote viewer. I go, where did you learn remote viewing? He goes, no, I'm a shaman. I go, have you been formally trained in remote viewing? No, I'm a shaman.
Yeah.
Okay. You're not a remote viewer.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I am. I'm a shaman. I remote view all the time. You're confusing the definition. Remote viewing is a dogma, a protocol, a structure-driven discipline. It was designed to be an intelligence collection methodology that has, a set process to extract data
Absolutely.
and then be formulated into a summary so that everybody is turning in similar products that then can be analyzed and correlated. It's not the fact that you're closing your eyes during some shamanic ayahuasca driven, episode and now you get to call yourself a remote viewer. I go, what would you think if I just turned around to you and said that because I'm a trained remote viewer, I'm a shaman? He goes, well, you're not. I go, I'm not. You're right. You're not a remote viewer, Jackass, I didn't say that, but it's like, for Pete's sake. But you now see people using remote viewing as a catch-all umbrella term. So people that, have a shingle out as a clairvoyant, a palm reader, a psychic, a trans medium, all these different things that there are 72 different real or perceived phenomena that fall under ESP, or paranormal.
Yes.
Well, now what's happened? See, remote viewing is one of those that falls under ESP, right? It's one of the 72. It is not a replacement for ESP or for paranormal. You don't throw remote viewing up to the top. And if you're some, you're a pyrokinetic. Now you're claiming, in addition to be able to start fires, with your hands, I'm also a remote viewer. I did a show for History Channel years ago, and it was a ninja show. It isn't worth even explaining all the details. But the guy that was the ninja, see, the remote viewers were 10 miles away, remote viewing this building to find where a hostage was.
Yes.
The LA SWAT, their job was to clear the building and SWAT would clear it to find the hostage. I didn't understand why they made that connection. I mean, remote viewers and then SWAT to go in and find independently, they just searched every room until they found the hostage. The ninja guy, what he did was he swapped out his ninja robes. I mean, I'm thinking like this guy's he's gonna be all ninja'd up, He's gonna have metal claws.
The cat claws,
like Spider-Man crawling around the building, looking in the windows to see where the hostage is. Now, you know what this guy does? He gets rid of his ninja costume and he puts on overalls, boots, t-shirt, gets a staff radio and a ladder and a can of dust off, and he starts walking in, and all the security had been told, don't let anybody in here. But he walked in and told a convincing enough lie to the security that he's like, man, they're getting ready to shoot this next thing, and I got to blow the lenses off on these cameras. You're going to screw this up, and they're going to chew your ass. And he convinces this guy to let him in. And so he gets in, he gets around the corner, sets the ladder down, and then peers in every room until he finds the hostage. And that was Ninja. I was like, that is so disappointing. So disappointing. But this guy, when they're interviewing him, he goes, yeah, he's, I've been practicing ninja techniques, all of the fighting and, other things. And, that was actually mind control, what I just did, with that guy. I was controlling his mind because he was told not to let anybody in, and I changed his mind for him, What you did was you threatened him that he was going to get in trouble and get fired. But okay. But then the guy says, and I kid you not, he goes, but I'm aware of all kinds of tools, remote viewing. I've been involved in remote viewing and all this other stuff. And I just wanted to go up to this guy and go, no, you have not, you buffoon, you don't know anything about remote viewing. You're just sitting here because the remote viewers did what they did. You want to attach your ninja coattails
Absolutely. Yeah.
to what
Monopolize
they
it.
did.
Yep.
And you didn't. You've not been trained.
Yeah.
You don't even know the first thing about it. You just think because you're a ninja, that you're now a viewer. You're like,
Yeah.
and it just happens more and more. But the reason it
Mm.
happens is because these are people that are off in little remote things that they dabble in, and they see remote viewing as a big movement that
Yes.
a
Yeah.
lot of credibility,
Hmm.
founded in science, used
Yeah.
as an intelligence collection methodology, and goes back to what we were saying early on in this.
Yeah.
You can make
Absolutely.
any claim whatsoever, and
Yeah.
who's gonna refute that claim?
Yeah. Yeah. We see it a lot. Well, I'm conscious that I kept you online here for 2 hours, but before we do
No,
go,
I'm
I do
fine.
want to ask you one question really, because it's quite really relevant to what's happening out there in the world. I've seen you do some work on Skinwalker Ranch. Um, and on there's two series out there at the moment. I think you've done some work on this on like the back kind of series, haven't you? It's the second kind of series for it. There's a main series and then there's another one. I'm interested because I've done two projects now where I've been a remote viewer and I've also tasked other remote viewers to look at Skinwalker. I just wonder what you think might be going on there, because it's a pretty dynamic place and it's been going on there for like 30 plus years now or more.
Well, some places can be paranormal, and
Yeah,
some places can be extraterrestrial, and some places can have aspects of both in them.
yeah,
Um, we've not done or been asked to do any work on Skinwalker Ranch. We've been working with Eric and Travis and Paul,
Beyond Skinwalker, I think it's
the
called, isn't it?
Beyond Skinwalker Ranch,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And the first one we did was Rocky Mountain Ranch.
Okay, yeah,
Rocky Mountain Ranch is one of those places that had a combination of a lot of things. And
mm,
I, we go into the process without any kind of front loading. I mean,
yep,
I was briefed by the producer about what Katie, the girl who was there,
yep,
on a lot of the things that happened. Well, that's okay that I can be aware of that because I don't share that with anybody. I then
yes,
play program manager, and
yep,
I have to, assemble a team of viewers. In
yep,
that first one, we had 72 viewers from 6 countries. And so we just did an online briefing. I explained to them what, you know, I don't tell them where it is or
yep,
what it's about, just that it's going to be done with the History Channel,
yes,
and that they can draw no conclusions about that, but that here's your target briefing. Here's
yep,
your first one. All of them were well trained CRVers, vast majority of them, biggest percentage ERVers, and they could use whatever methodology they wanted. And we just refreshed on map sensing,
yes,
the protocols for map sensing. And so what my tasking was to get the viewers to find hot spots for them,
yep,
because they wanted to know what the viewers were perceiving as hot spots so that they could
okay,
either use that to correlate with their own findings, their own
yep,
measurements and findings, and or to provide remote viewer perspectives on things they can't answer, right?
yes, yep,
Things that they may have been told about
mm,
by people at the ranch,
yep,
but they have no confirmation of that. So now, if people operating, in 6 different countries are
yep,
producing data that correlates with what they've been told without those people actually knowing anything about it, well,
yeah,
that's
gotcha,
significant to them, and it was significant to Travis, and it was significant to
yep,
Eric and to everyone else involved in that. And so the first one was so involved and so much data. In fact, Travis said to me, he goes, God, I hope you have AI, because I did the briefing of what the viewers produce and
yeah,
how much they should be able to produce. Because if you're sensing on the X plane,
mm,
you have 4 different points you have to sense. Each point you sense, you now have to give me stage 1, 2, and 3 data
yep,
relevant to that point sensed.
Yes.
Then you have to sense on another sheet, still on the X plane, to find the next point. And as you indicate that point on the target sheet, which is just a square, right?
Yeah.
They have to then give a stage 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3 data on that. Not 1, 2, and 3, but 2 and 3 data. I don't give a shit about an ideogram on that point. That's serious. So I just want that data. And if any aesthetic or emotional or intangible comes in, throw that down as well.
Yeah.
And then they do that for 4 points on the X, then 4 points on the Y, and 4 points on the Z. The X plane is what's on the surface. The Y plane ends up being what's above the surface.
Yeah.
And the Z plane is what is below the surface.
Yes.
They don't know that. They just are given, those things.
Yep.
And then all of those are pulled together and put into a three-dimensional graph.
Yes.
Shows all the clusters, right?
Yep.
Above, on the surface, and below the surface. Green clusters are green little tiny 3D balls on the surface. It's blue in the sky and black underground.
Yes. Yep.
And then those maps are flipped over, and you probably saw the dissolve, where you dissolved in the actual map below it from a satellite.
Yes.
What the viewers had captured as data points. Well, it's thousands upon thousands of data points.
Yeah.
Thousands. It's 72 viewers, each of them are producing 16 data points.
Wow.
And the pages that accompany each of those 16 points.
Yeah.
That's just in one aspect of it. That the data from that was thousands of pages of data. And no, we did not have AI to scan through. You can't.
How do you analyze that much data? Crazy.
It's stubby pencil work. You sit down with a team and you look for quantifiable attributes that should be perceivable at the site. And you start clustering it together. You're looking for how many of the viewers are coming up with red and what their dimensionals are, their textures, their dimensionals, their contours, their energetics, their sounds, their smells, their tastes, right? Their tangibles, intangibles, aesthetic data, emotional data. You're correlating all of that.
Yes. Yep.
500 of these, 700 of these, etc.
Wow. Yep.
Now it all becomes part of the final summary that is going to be briefed to Travis, Eric, Paul, and Andy and Bustamante. So all of that is done, and they look at all of that, and they were like, "Shit, this is too much stuff. We can't possibly fit this in to everything else we're doing." So they made some short reference. They made like a short video that was like after the show. But then we got called back, after the show aired and some months down the road. And what they said is, we want to go back and retell this story again, but we want to tell the remote viewing story about this now.
Excellent.
And they did. And so that became an entire kind of after show that was done. That primarily talked about remote viewers and what remote viewers were doing and how they did it. And then we got asked for their second season to do Taos Ranch. Again, never been there, didn't talk to anybody, just heard from the producer, the story, the backstory, belonged to this artist, blah, blah, blah. He died there. The wife and he had a fight. She moved down to a different place, but when he died, she left and never went back to the place because it was disturbing to her. And so that one, the Rocky Mountain Ranch ended up being a mix of different things, a huge mix of different, categories or silos of perceptions of decoded data, objectified data by the viewers.
Yes.
That primarily, it was seen as, an intersection of portals, like a portal cluster.
Yes.
Where, like road maps in the sky.
Yes.
were joining there. See them, then
Awesome.
they're gone. See them, and they're gone.
Yeah.
Vertical, horizontal. And then there were others. Sorry, it's dry here. There were other pieces of it that ended up being like, in my opinion, not paranormal, but like visible extraterrestrial kind of stuff. Like
Yep.
beings that were not like things that you normally see being portrayed as extraterrestrials.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's
But
okay.
one of the sketches that was done by about 20 viewers was of this small black thing that looked, in my mind, if I were going to call it, I'd say Felix the cat. You're
Yep.
looking at this thing, and everybody's got versions of it, right?
Mm.
But the producers pick one
Yes. Yeah.
and throw it out there, and then we talk about how many people perceived it, and Andy Bustamante goes, "That's really creepy," because the grandmother that resides up in this place, it described this to all of us as we were asking her about her experiences, described this little
Yeah.
dark, furry thing. And she
Mm.
said, don't piss it off and don't scare it away. That's what she told them.
Yeah.
So they were like, shit. And the viewers saw this thing without knowing anything about this thing.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that was, Rocky Mountain Ranch was one thing. It also had a lot of pretty explainable things.
Yeah.
Like, Shell Oil was fracking there in 1951.
Okay. Yeah.
So there are all kinds of fracking sites. There were massive aquifers there at one point. Massive aquifers, because they had those center point agricultural sprinklers. They sink a
Yeah.
well straight down into the aquifer, and
Yes.
they have when you're flying, you look down, you see green discs on the earth.
Yeah.
That's what that is. But
Yep.
if you look in that particular area, southeast of Denver,
Mhm.
you'll see all of these dried up. You can see
Yes.
where the fields were, but they are not there anymore because the aquifers are dry. They've diminished water supply there so much. And so that means that there are hollow caves, and that
Yeah.
there are, underground caves with stalactites and stalagmites, and
Yeah.
or caves that they just have loose shale or stone or other things in them that was once seeded with, just thick with water underwater. And that's not
Yeah.
there. But because of that, there's an echoic effect that goes on there.
Okay. Yeah.
Fracking can be amplified, and so you can stand on the surface on a quiet night, especially out in the country there.
Yeah.
You're not hearing sounds of the city or traffic,
Yeah.
and you can hear that kind of stuff going in there,
Wow.
because they
Yeah.
don't just
Yeah.
frack straight down, they frack diagonally and
Yes.
horizontally. That's going on there. So, but when I was bringing that up, they were kind of like, yeah, we don't want to talk about that. You have the busiest military airport in the world there, and
Yeah.
that is the Air Force Academy. It is considered the busiest military airport in existence, the Air Force Academy Airport.
Yeah.
You go X number of miles south past, Pikes Peak, and you have Fort Collins, Colorado,
Yeah.
where you've got Blackhawks, Chinooks, Apache helicopters, everything imaginable is there, and
Yes. Yeah.
maneuvers and flying around. And people that don't know that, they look up and go, "Oh, it's a black helicopter." It's a black helicopter. The numbers on it the tail numbers are subdued. It
Yeah.
does say U.S. Army, but you can't see it when it's flying over there. It's intended that way. It's not it's a secret. It's just
Yeah.
it's camouflage paint on it. Cart paint, it's called. But that was out. It's entertainment. Is
Yes.
what
Yes.
they're doing, and they don't want to throw those kinds of things out. They want to
Absolutely.
grab
Yeah.
the things that that audience is going to want to hear about.
Yeah.
Taos, that became a a paranormal experience,
Mm.
which was disconcerting to one of the producers.
Yeah.
There's a director who, there's a director, and then there's the producer, and then another producer. But the one producer we were working with, he was disconcerted about that. He goes, "We are not a ghost show." I'm going, well, maybe not a ghost show, but I'm telling you that I had in that target there were 50 viewers from 5 different countries.
Yeah.
And I have some of them to this day that tell me that they're still disturbed by what they saw, what they
Mm.
sensed there.
Yeah.
So it's phantom filled. It's filled
Awesome.
with evil. And people don't understand. People have a tendency in the United States to think that, these indigenous peoples, that they just somehow were God given and sprung up out of the earth like weeds or wildflowers.
Yeah.
Anything but that is true. I
Mm.
mean, the first of them came, what we know is like 25,000 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Came from Africa, Europe, Africa, from Asia, Russia, and came
Yeah.
across either the kelp trail, the kelp trail, or the
Yeah.
ice trail, and came across and moved down in and inhabited all of that.
Mm.
But the reason that those tribes are there at those times and why those tribes survive is because they killed everybody else. I
Yeah.
mean, it was tribal and it
Yeah.
was violent. And if you didn't have food and another tribe did, you didn't go begging. You
Yeah.
went after them.
You
And if
killed
you
him. Yeah.
killed them all,
Yeah.
the only things you took from them were horses, right? You took horses, you took children that you could raise as your own
Yeah.
because you would increase the thickening of the gene pool for yourself.
Yeah.
You took childbearing aged women.
Mhm.
You killed all the braves and all the old men and all
Yep.
the old women.
Yep.
You kept the skins, you kept food, you kept weapons if you chose to and put your own markings on them. But that's what that was about. And
Yes.
people think it was like, the white man came in and made all this happen.
Mm.
No, the colonists that came over from Europe, what did everybody think they were going to do when they went up across the Appalachians and went down? What are they supposed to say? Like, oh, well, let's go back because people live here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, when did that happen at any place in the world ever?
Yeah.
The indigenous peoples were violent and vicious
Yeah.
and ambitious to gain more territories. And yes, there were lots of them, but they were not friends. And they were spiritual, but they were spiritual, for their tribe. And
Tribe. Yeah.
and they killed anything that got in their way, or anything
Yes.
that
Yeah.
impeded the strength of the tribe, the survival of that tribe, in any way, shape, or form. And
Yep.
so, when it was in that area and the Spaniards came, their first understanding of that kind of a people, and
Yes.
they saw those Spaniards as warriors that enslaved their people.
Yeah.
But prior to that time, they had slaughtered tens of thousands of each other. They're unearthing, mass graves in the Dakotas, right now,
Mhm.
that have like 800 men, women, and children, all
Yeah.
slaughtered mercilessly, like with blows to the head, and then thrown in mass graves and covered up by indigenous people.
Yes. Yeah.
They wanted that area. Well, in this area, you finally had this Pueblo, the Pueblo Rising, the Pueblo tribe, rose up against their enslavers, which were Spaniards, the conquistadors and things. But it was a bloodletting that ground in that area, like Taos and other places there, was soaked in blood. It was soaked in blood before the Spaniards got there, but it was soaked in even more blood when the wars with the Spaniards continued, because Spaniards were a pretty formidable army, armor and horses and the weaponry that they had. So lots died on both sides, and the fight continued on. And even when the Civil War came about, the indigenous peoples there fought against the Union and fought against the Confederates as they moved into those particular areas, which they did.
Yeah.
So, telling that story from a remote viewing perspective, you know what that's like, right? The
Yeah.
overwhelming emotional
Mhm.
data that leads into an emotional impact, and the
Yes.
aesthetic data which leads into aesthetic impact.
Yeah.
All of the intangible concepts surrounding all of this, but
Mhm.
just the sketches of, like indigenous ghosts rising up
Yeah.
out of the soil,
Wow. Yeah.
a Pueblo building that had this grotesque demonic face up over the top of it.
Yeah.
And it was stuff that they weren't really comfortable in putting it in there. But
Yeah.
then when Andy and Paul were there,
Yeah.
really funny thing, and I don't even think they told this story, but Paul was understanding of what this place was before getting there.
Yeah.
He brought in a shaman to come in and offer the entire film crew, a blessing, bless
Yes.
them, and to protect them and
Yeah.
where they were and where they were staying.
Unknown
That was all
caller.
done. That was all done. Sorry. That was all done in preparation of going out to this place.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was going, you guys do know that radon gas, it has the highest levels of radon gas of anywhere in the world.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like 9.4, which makes it like, 9.4 parts per million, which means
Yeah.
it's higher than any place. Nowhere else has got that. So that was a little disconcerting to them.
Yeah.
But it ended up strongly being paranormal, demonic, haunted,
Yes.
and a sense of evil. But the clusters were still present there, the sensed clusters below
Yeah.
the ground, on the ground, and above the ground. But for
Mhm.
the first time, we were able to spin the 3D models around and overlay a protractor and to come up with altitudes
Yeah.
and for an azimuth. So an
Awesome. Yeah.
elevation and a deflection for them. So Andy looks at me. He's like, seriously? So like you're telling us now where to shoot the rockets? I go, once a mortar platoon leader, always a mortar platoon leader. Elevation and deflection. So there you go, man. You
Mm.
guys figure it out. You can shoot it this way or shoot it over there, or just pick a spot and shoot, I guess.
Yeah.
So they shot, from what I understand, they shot to those major clusters, and they had some
Awesome.
very strange findings there.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome work.
Yeah, it was fun.
Excellent. Well, we've been going at this 2.25 hours now, so I don't want to keep eating into your time.
It's up
But
to you, brother, because I told you I was long format. So if you're exhausted, I
it's
understand.
1:15 here for me in the UK.
Yeah,
But I would love, if you're up for this, I would love because I still have a huge list of questions. I would love, if we could maybe have another chat at some point if you're up for that, because it's been fantastic hearing all the knowledge that you have to share on all these subjects and more.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's
We
been
just have to work
fantastic.
it in.
And it's just a shame that I left it so long to try to reach out to you. Really, as I said, your books have been inspirational to me, and they've helped me on my journey, and I know they've helped many other people out there as well. So, yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for everything you do. What I would like to do though is I can get this off camera with you. If I can get all the details of anything you'd like to promote, any courses or anything, give those to me, and then I can give them to all the subscribers in the description text as well.
Yeah, I guess the most important thing would be to tell people to go to, www.davidmorehouse.org. Do not go to davidmorehouse.com or sign up for or buy anything there. I do not have the domain name rights to that. So I don't endorse anything there.
Yeah.
Basically, they have just pirated my imagery, my materials, my voice, my videos, and other things that are out there, and put it together as an online course and that kind of stuff.
Wow. That's awesome.
And anybody that asks me about it, I say, ask for your money back.
Yeah.
Don't sign up for anything. Don't buy anything there. If you want to hear anything about anything, go to www.davidmorehouse. It's morehouse.org.
Okay.
Right now, you'll see descriptions of classes there, but I am as I was started to say and didn't finish actually the thought, I'm working with Upgrade and William Lamb, and I'm doing it exclusively. And I, I will just tell you that it's not affordable for most people.
Mm.
The entire, his program is designed for entrepreneurs
Yeah.
and wealthy people.
Yeah.
So, like an ERV class is $6,800.
Mm.
A CRV class is $5,800.
Yeah.
I'm only going to continue doing that for a period of time.
Okay.
And then, we will start offering, the staff and I are going to put a schedule together and we'll start offering it
Awesome.
at much more, much better prices than that.
Yeah.
That is for, people that have the money to spend.
There
to
are
do-
some people out there that will spend that. So yeah, that's an
There
option
are-
for those. Yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of them,
Yeah.
but they drive around in Bentleys and $550,000 Porsches and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So,
But we'll definitely keep in touch, and let me know at any point. Let me know any courses or anything you want to do, because I have several Facebook remote viewing groups with 5 to 10,000 remote viewers on remote viewing interested people in. So I can, I'm more than happy to promote anything that you've got out there, for those people.
do you mean promote it as in organizing a live course in the
What not myself, but if you've got something that you want to get out to the general public, I'm more than happy to put it out to the hardcore people that I know out there that are looking for mentoring and training, and there are a lot of those out there.
Yeah, we're going to launch a membership site
Excellent.
that people can sign up to and pay for different levels of that, which will, entitle them to practice, practice targets. And my practice targets are not like anything you will have ever seen because they all are video feedback, and the written feedback is typically like 23 pages.
Wow,
There'll be
excellent.
anywhere
Extensive.
from 150 to 200, sometimes 250 quantifiable attributes,
Yeah.
which means that that's 250 things that should be perceivable at the target
Yeah.
site. So you can go through your session and look at those and see, kind of give yourself a statistical, rating of where you stand in those categories. It's not just a big list of them. They are, colors, textures, temperatures, taste, sound, smells,
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great.
energetics, contours, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's involved. It's good feedback. It helps you. It gives you links to go see other videos, and it gives you links for other websites to pull down other comparative data. Because the most important thing is for people that are being trained, especially in CRV and ERV, for them to build their confidence, and by being encouraged to roll up your sleeves and don't take your what you did in this session for face value based on a video feedback or a one page copy of something that somebody gives you. You need to have as much information as you can, and you need to dig deep and see, because you may have spent 3 pages describing something that's not in the video
Yes.
but is present at the target site.
That's right. Yeah.
So
That sounds awesome.
Okay.
Definitely a tool that's much needed, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, as I said, it's been great chatting to you, and yeah, let's do this again. As I said, I got a huge amount more questions that we could go through at some point. That would be awesome.
just let me know when you get another opening. I'm gonna be stacked here for a little bit, going out and do another History Channel thing. This one is explained.
Good luck with all that as well. That looks fantastic.
Yeah, they're fun.
And good luck with Irva as well, because I can see you're getting a lot more involved with that. So that's good to see as well.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It was good to be there to talk to them. I think clearly there are a lot of different experience levels and history
Yeah.
and skill levels there, and a lot of them understand what I'm talking about, and I fear that a lot of them don't, and wish I would just shut up when I'm in those meetings now and stop talking about things.
I think that's the same with every organization. But Deborah, who's in charge of it at the moment, she has done a good job in trying to take it in a different direction. So I'm pleased that you're involved with that now. That's awesome to see.
Yeah. All
Excellent.
right, Daz, my friend. Good to
Thank you
talk
very
to
much
you.
for doing
Thank you
this.
for
It's been
having me.
great meeting you. It's been, as I said, it's an honor for me. I've been wanting to do this for nearly 30 years now, I think, since I first read your book. So
Oh,
it's awesome, man. Yeah, let's do this again sometime. It'd be great to chat.
sure. Just tell me when you got some openings. I mean, that's what Sean always does. Like, can you do something Saturday or can you do something Friday?
Yeah, that'd be good.
I'm
Maybe if,
not otherwise engaged. I mean, yeah, I'm always happy to
yeah,
talk.
I'd love to do a freeway chat with Sean and you as well at some point because Sean's a very interesting guy as well to chat to.
He very much is. He was a
Yeah,
former Army officer.
he
So,
is. Yeah, yeah. I love chatting. I've done about 3 or 4 chats with him now. He's a great guy.
yep. I love Sean a lot.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks for that,
All right,
David.
Daz.
Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.